I thought the worst pain I'd ever feel was being unloved. Until the woman who said she loved me tried to make sure I never walked free again. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about survival when love turns into a weapon. Hi there and welcome to Real Cheating Story. As I sit here in my power chair, tucked away in this room with two of my closest friends standing watch, waiting for the verdict of my trial, my mind keeps drifting back. I can't help but wonder, how did it all come to this? Could I have made different choices? Could my future have played out another way? Growing up, my childhood was about as ordinary as it gets for a middle-class family. Things didn't really start to change until I hit 12. That's when puberty hit me hard, like a freight train I never saw coming. Up until then, I looked like your average preteen. I was on the tall side and kind of lanky, standing 5 feet 4 inches and weighing just 92 pounds. But after that, the weight started piling on. I'm not even sure when it became noticeable, but soon enough, both my classmates and even my teachers began to take note. Eventually, I needed a power chair to get around, and since I didn't have any health insurance at the time, I had to pay for it out of pocket. Thankfully, someone at the medical supply store introduced me to an insurance agent who really knew his stuff. Through him, I managed to get both medical and life insurance, which was a huge relief. For as long as I can remember, I had a strange talent. I could look at systems or programs and just instinctively know how to make them better. I didn't know where it came from, it was just there. During my junior year, I rewrote a popular accounting software, made it more efficient, and ended up selling it to a tech firm for $1 million. Even with all that success, my body remained a source of pain and frustration. My knees, hips, and calves were still relatively slender, but the rest of me had ballooned out so much that I looked completely disproportionate. Imagine someone so overweight they had to rely on a motorized chair just to get from one room to the next. That was me. But then there was Simone. Somehow she looked past all of that. I don't know what she saw in me, but I knew she saw something. I could feel it. That afternoon, I returned to my office to put together a proposal. Training would be a big part of it, especially since this was a law firm packed with high-profile attorneys who likely thought they were too important to sit through a seminar on something as basic as login credentials. As I sat at my desk, still thinking about Simone, I remembered her parting words. "Goodbye, Tom. I'll see you Thursday." Did she say it was a pleasure meeting me? No, that couldn't be right. A woman like her? Interested in a guy like me? I had to be imagining it. She was just being courteous, more courteous than most ever were, but still just polite. Sure, I could have sent Shawn Michaels to handle all the preliminary stuff. But this wasn't just any client. This law firm played in the big leagues around here, and I wanted to make sure everything was handled perfectly. We had managed to get everything just right. Normally, I don't handle much of the initial legwork myself, but this case was different. The evidence against this guy was practically handed to us, straight from his own inbox. And he wasn't exactly subtle about it either. He was conducting these affairs during the workday, billing hours to active cases while dumping the grunt work on interns and junior associates. The paper trail he left behind was massive, almost comically so. And the worst part? He kept everything stored right on his work computer like he thought no one would ever bother to look. Some of the emails he exchanged were downright explicit, crossing into territory that probably could have been flagged under stricter company policies. And it didn't stop there. His computer and laptop were loaded with images and videos, the kind that left very little to the imagination. Turns out he also worked from home frequently. His work computer had an active link to his home setup, so I had access to both systems. It was like opening a door into his double life, and he hadn't even bothered to lock it. That morning as I was settling in, Simone appeared again. "Tom, I'm so glad to see you. I hope your presentation goes well today. I've reviewed both your report and the proposal. You've done excellent work. I think they're going to be really impressed with the insight and level of detail you brought." She mentioned there might be some pushback from a couple of folks in the room. Understandable, considering how much money was on the line. "Don't let it rattle you," she said. "They'll warm up to it." The energy between us, it was undeniable. I couldn't explain it, but something real was happening there, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. When it came time for my presentation, I got right into it. I walked them through the proposal, highlighting where their physical security protocols were solid, and where there were obvious gaps that needed to be addressed. Then I pivoted to electronic security. That's where their real problems lived. Their email systems were a mess, unsecured, outdated, and full of vulnerabilities. I laid it all out, clear and honest. Once I wrapped up, I opened the floor for questions. One of the partners, Mr. Langston, spoke up. "So if I understand correctly, our biggest weaknesses are digital?" Later, while I was making my way through the office, I spoke briefly with a receptionist, and then Simone and I stepped into the elevator. We rode down to the lobby in silence, but it wasn't awkward, it was something else. I still wasn't sure how to read all of this. Her warmth, her kindness. This kind of attention wasn't something I was used to. I didn't know the proper way to respond, or even what was expected of me. When we sat down for lunch, I insisted on picking up the check. It just felt right. It was the least I could do after the way she'd made me feel seen. I ordered a pastrami on rye with provolone, a good dose of spicy mustard, and a bottle of water. Simone went for something lighter, a small salad with slices of turkey, some grated cheddar, and an unsweetened iced tea. It was a simple meal, but I couldn't focus much on the food with her sitting across from me. Back at the office, while digging into more of the firm's internal data, things kept getting worse. Max, one of the senior guys, wasn't just working cases, he was running a whole separate operation right from his desk. Turns out he was flipping event tickets and buying up rare finds on eBay during office hours. And just like everything else, it was all right there on his desktop. No effort to cover his tracks. When I wrapped up my report, I pointed out the major issues. These are some of the biggest red flags I've come across, I said. But there's one more thing, passwords. I explained how they had login credentials still active for employees who'd left over 3 years ago. Those should have been wiped as soon as they walked out the door. I reminded them about the substantial budget allocation for training. That's in there for a reason, I said. We need to bring Adam, Pat, and Max up to speed, and the rest of your staff too. If you want this place secure, they all need to be trained properly. That's when Brian leaned forward. Hey Tom, can you access my email and tell me what the last message I sent was? Sure, give me a second, I replied, fingers tapping on the keyboard. After about a minute, I looked up and said, you just sent a mass email to all your IT employees instructing them to change their passwords immediately. Sound about right? I turned the screen so Mark and Glenn, seated on either side of me, could see it for themselves. Mark glanced around the room, then looked me dead in the eye. How soon can we get your system in place, Tom? Later that evening, Simone and I were texting again. I honestly don't go out much, she said. I usually eat at home or maybe hit super salad if I'm running errands. But if you want to pick a place, I'm good with that. Works for me, I said. Just as long as they can accommodate my chair. I'm sure that won't be a problem, she replied with a smiley. See you in a few hours, Tom. Until then, Simone, I typed back. I motored out to the elevators and made my way to the van parked on the 4th floor. I was floating. Completely weightless. I could barely believe it, me going on what felt like my very first real date with a woman. And not just any woman, Simone. When Monday rolled around, I got home and practically collapsed. Saturday had drained me. I threw myself into work just to keep my mind off the growing sense of doubt creeping in. By the time the weekend ended, I had convinced myself she wasn't coming back. Just like all the others. They show interest for a while, but once they spend enough time around me, they disappear. They always do. I let myself sleep in Sunday, well, late for me anyway. I woke up around 8 a.m. that Sunday. Made myself some breakfast, flipped through the newspaper, and started a few loads of laundry. At home, I could get around a bit, walk short distances with the help of a cane or a walker, but I couldn't stand in one place for very long. The ramps outside my house made things easier, and I'd had those put in years ago. We got started bright and early Monday morning around 8:30. Funny how time slips by when you're deep into something, whether it's work or just the distraction of staying busy. The rest of the week passed in a blur, except for Wednesday. Tuesday evening, I got a call from Gary. He was working on a new piece of equipment for AMD and Samsung, but something wasn't clicking. Hey Tom, I could really use your help tomorrow, he said. I told him I'd be there. So Wednesday and Thursday were spent side by side, working out the kinks in the machine. By the end of the second day, it was humming along without a hitch, ready for demo and delivery. And then, in the middle of that stretch of normalcy, Simone dropped a bombshell. Tom, she said on the drive home, her voice soft but steady, I was your first date, wasn't I? I mean, have you ever been with someone before? I took a long breath. No, Simone. I haven't. I'm a virgin. I've never been with a woman, not like that. I know all the right things in theory. I've just never had the chance to learn by experience. So no, I don't know if I'd be any good at it. But I'd try for the right person. She didn't flinch. She just looked at me. And for the first time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could accept me fully. She even asked something that made my heart stop. Do you think we could plan a wedding by September? Or is that too soon? If it were up to me, I told her, I'd marry you tomorrow. But September? That sounds perfect. But then, everything fell apart. One evening not long after that conversation, something didn't sit right. I'd had suspicions, sure, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, I checked the security feed from her place, something she knew I had access to, and what I saw nearly broke me. Mate. Pressing in on her. Kissing her. She didn't pull away. In fact, within moments they were tangled up on her couch. I watched, stunned, as their clothes came off. Before I could fully process it, they were together. It didn't even take 2 minutes before I felt my stomach turn. I rushed to the bathroom and lost everything I'd eaten that day. I kept recording even though every part of me screamed to shut it off. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her face to face that Saturday, right after what looked like another long, exhausting session with him. She had no idea I'd seen it all. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I understood what heartbreak really felt like. After that, she left. Drove off without another word. I didn't hear from her for 5 whole days. Then, like nothing had happened, she returned, not to speak, but to sign the separation papers I had left for her on the kitchen table. I took them straight to my lawyer, Evan Carter. The following Thursday she called me. Her voice trembled as she said, "Why, Tom? Why did you do it? You promised you wouldn't hurt him? Why?" Then she hung up. Just like that. At first, I had no idea what Simone meant when she said that on the phone. Her words kept replaying in my mind, but none of it made any sense. That was until I heard the doorbell. I wheeled over and opened the front door, greeted by the sight of 2 uniformed police officers standing on the porch. I pushed the screen door open and asked, "Can I help you?" One of them stepped forward. "Are you Thomas H. Langston?" "Yes, sir." "What's going on?" The next thing I knew, everything changed. The world around me blurred, and when I finally came to, I wasn't at home anymore. I was lying in a hospital bed, the sterile ceiling lights glaring down on me. A nurse stood nearby, and as my vision focused, she said gently, "You gave us quite the scare, Mr. Langston. You've been in a coma for nearly 3 weeks. There were moments we thought we'd lost you for good, but you kept fighting your way back." As soon as I had the strength, I asked for my lawyer. That's all I could think about. Something had gone horribly wrong, and I needed someone in my corner. But the officer in the room didn't budge. "You already got your phone call, remember?" he said. I didn't remember. I remembered asking for a lawyer when they first brought me in, when they found me in that holding cell. But nothing after that. It was all a blank. When my lawyer, Evan Carter, showed up, we finally started piecing things together. The prosecution was building a case against me, trying to pin Carter's death on me. The very man who had helped me prepare my own defense was now gone, and somehow they believed I had something to do with it. "But that doesn't make any sense," Arthur, Evan's assistant, said during one of our meetings. "Tom can't even manage stairs. That's why he uses the chair. He can use a cane at home for short distances, but he can't climb a flight of stairs, let alone make it to the 3rd floor where Carter was found." Evan nodded. "Exactly. His physical condition alone makes it practically impossible. And that might be our saving grace here." Still, we knew the prosecution would push back hard. "They'll probably argue you paid someone to do it, Tom," Evan warned me. "That's the angle they'll take." Things got even messier when they tried to introduce computer evidence into the case. Evidence pulled from my personal devices. But the judge, Paul Richards, wasn't letting them off easy. "Mr. Anderson," Judge Richards asked, addressing the prosecutor, "why has the defense not been granted access to the computer for independent analysis? Have you had a certified forensic expert examine the device? Or did you simply take it at face value? You're aware that in this digital age, computer tampering isn't just possible, it's common. Especially given someone with Mr. Langston's reputation in the tech world." That line gave me a sliver of hope. The truth was on our side, now we just had to prove it. Later, during one of our conversations, Evan brought up a different matter entirely. "We're going to push for funding to get you proper care," he said. "A nurse, a physical therapist, someone to help get your strength back." He looked at me with a faint smile. "That stumble you had in court, when your extra skin caused you to trip? Honestly, Tom, it helped your case more than you think." I shook my head. "That wasn't planned, Evan. I can't control that part of me. It just sort of flops around however it wants. I've lost so much weight," I added quietly. "But the damage, it's already done. All I was left with now was loose, empty skin and a body that betrayed me at every turn. I couldn't work out, couldn't even move much, not without risking everything. If I showed even a hint of physical improvement, the prosecution would pounce. They'd twist it, say I'd been faking my limitations all along. So for now, I had to stay still even when all I wanted was to get my life back. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the cold, rubbery eggs with those greasy, congealed sausage links weren't exactly appetizing. But I forced myself to eat anyway. I didn't know when I'd be allowed another meal. Later, I rummaged through the fridge and found some leftover salad. It wasn't much, but it helped. I poured myself a glass of cold water, sipped slowly, then leaned back and told Arthur and Evan, "Guys, I really appreciate you both being here, but I need to lie down for a bit. I'm beyond exhausted. I'll call you once I've had some rest and we know a little more." They nodded and let themselves out. That's when I heard a soft voice behind me. "How did you get in?" I asked, startled. "Come on, silly Tommy," Simone said with a tired smile. "I still have my keys. You never changed the locks." I just stared at her, unsure whether to feel anger or hope. She walked closer. "I know this is sudden, but I'm here because I still love you." Evan called and explained everything, that there's no way you could have done what they're accusing you of. I believe him. And I believe in you. Her voice cracked. "I'll testify if you need me to. I want to help. I know now that I was wrong. I never even went to Nathaniel's apartment, not really. I didn't know what I was doing. And now I just want to help you get better, and maybe, just maybe, we could start over." There was something in her eyes, genuine sorrow but also something like hope. "If I ever start thinking or acting like I did back then," she said, "I want you to stop me. I want to be better." I didn't know what to say. The Simone I saw now wasn't the same person who had broken my heart. She was stripped of all the shine, all the glamour. And maybe that's why I finally saw it all for what it really was, how cheap and shallow it had become. I hadn't deserved what she did to me. No one did. Back then, she had treated me like something she needed to scrape off her shoe after a walk in the park. And yet, I had still loved her. Still hoped she would never find out how much pain she caused, how much she had shattered everything I held sacred. Now, standing there in my living room, she looked like someone who had been broken too. "I wanted to tell you everything," she whispered. "That night when you said you knew, I had planned to confess. To explain it all. I swear it. When I said she could move back in, just for now, just to help me get through this," her whole face lit up. It was like seeing the sun rise after weeks of darkness. "Oh, Tom," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me gently. "I love you so much." She looked me in the eyes and said softly, "Tom, I'm going to do everything I can to show you what you mean to me, for the rest of my life. I'm moving in tonight. But right now I need to head to work. I want to help you clear your name." Before she left, she kissed me. And it wasn't just a polite kiss, it was full of something I hadn't felt in years. It stirred something in me I thought might have stopped working altogether. Turns out it hadn't. And that realization brought a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in a long, long time. The way she looked at me, it reminded me of the early days. That dreamy, glowing look she used to give me, back when it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Maybe this time, I thought, maybe this is a real chance to start over. A clean slate. Now, I won't dive into the brutal details of my first full day back in physical therapy, courtesy of a no-nonsense Nordic powerhouse named Ellen. Let's just say I discovered muscles and pain points I didn't even know existed. It felt like someone had gone after me with a flaming pitchfork. Everything burned. Deep, searing aches that left me breathless. Just after 5 p.m., Ellen finally let up. As she packed her bag, she looked back and said with a matter-of-fact tone, "I'll be back in the morning. I live here now." I blinked. "Wait, you live here?" "Yes, Tom," she said without missing a beat. "You'll have the room. We'll make it work." That night, as Simone and I settled back into our rhythm, the conversation turned toward something bigger. Children. We hadn't talked much about it yet. We couldn't, not until after the trial. There were too many unknowns, too much weight hanging over everything. She needed to understand that nothing could move forward, not really, until all of this was behind us. That evening she made dinner. A simple, perfect meal. The meat was tender and just the right size, about 3 inches square before she cut it up. She'd prepared a small baked potato, maybe a little smaller than a tennis ball, and a modest portion of salad, probably around a cup and a half. It was exactly the kind of portion I used to eat back before everything changed. As we sat there quietly eating, she finally opened up again. "I thought maybe you went back on your word? That you'd killed him, because of what we did." "I was terrified, Tom. I thought you were going to come for me too. That's when I called you." She paused, her voice trembling. "But then, I never heard from you again." I looked down at my plate, heart tightening. She continued, "Evan called a few weeks later. Told me you were in the prison hospital. That you were very sick. I felt completely alone. I'm sure you did too." She took a breath. I took some time off. Went back home. Just tried to breathe. There was a silence between us. Heavy but not angry. It was the silence of two people who had been through a storm and were now sitting quietly in the wreckage, unsure of what could be rebuilt, but still sitting side by side. I stayed away for about a month trying to clear my head, but eventually I came back. I buried myself in work, hoping it would distract me. But the truth was, my heart just wasn't in it anymore. Something inside me had gone quiet. Before my hearing, I took a long look at myself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. Where fat used to cover my frame, there was now nothing but loose, sagging skin. I looked like one of those Shar-Pei dogs, the kind with all the extra folds and wrinkles, like they're still waiting to grow into their own body. My stomach, once round and full, now drooped down almost to my knees. I was a mess. But somehow, Simone looked at me like I was still whole. She smiled as she ran her fingers lightly over my sagging skin and said with a teasing grin, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to fatten you back up. Now that I'm home, we can work on that together." That night, as we lay in bed, Simone curled into my arms like she belonged there. She nestled against my chest and whispered, "I'm home now, Tom. For good." I whispered back, "Goodbye to the past then," and kissed her forehead gently. Meanwhile, Ellen was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. It wasn't long before she reminded me it was time for our next physical therapy session, aka the torture chamber. Around 9 a.m. I got the call. "The judge reached a decision," Evan said. "We need to be in court at 1 p.m. sharp. I'll come pick you up. We'll take your van." That afternoon, I rolled into court in my power chair, wearing an old suit from my college days. It was a size 52 regular, way too big now, hanging off me like it belonged to someone else. But it was the best I had. The attorney on the other side hadn't exactly shined during mock trials in school. From what I'd heard, he was more of a jack-of-all-trades type. That didn't surprise me. What did surprise me, though, was something he said after digging deeper into my company. "Tom, when I started learning more about your work, about the business you built, I was impressed," he admitted. "Not just by you, but by the people you surrounded yourself with. They're bright, loyal, just like you." I knew right then I wanted in. He explained how he had bought into the company through some of my partners while I was still laid up in the hospital. They needed funds to cover my legal defense, and he saw an opportunity to support something he believed in. Later, I asked him, half joking, "So, how would you like a job as my CFO?" He laughed. "I think you need a much bigger company for a chief financial officer, don't you?" I grinned. "Okay, how about CFO in training?" That's where it started for him. Looking back, I realized that most of my team, my employees, my people, had come to me through word of mouth. Friends of friends. People who'd heard about what we were building and wanted to be part of it. And somehow, even through everything, they stuck by me. Back in school, I had a good eye for spotting talent, especially the kind of talent that didn't always shine in the spotlight. I sought out folks who reminded me of myself. A little nerdy, deeply technical, maybe socially awkward but brilliant in their own field. When I found someone like that, I made the effort to bring them on board. Most said yes. A few turned me down at the time, and more than one of them came back later saying they wished they hadn't. I had managed to build a tight, highly skilled team. We were like a small, well-oiled machine with a bond that felt more like family than co-workers. Evan had just finished outlining the next steps when he said, "You need to get some rest, Tom. Let us handle what comes next. We'll sort through everything the DA sends over. There's nothing more you need to worry about tonight." I nodded, but one question was still nagging at me. "Arthur," I said, glancing toward him, "Simone wants us to get remarried. But what if I'm found guilty? What kind of future would she be walking into, tied to someone the system sees as a murderer?" Arthur looked me in the eye. "There are two ways to look at that, Tom. But maybe first ask yourself why you want to know. Is it fear talking? Or love?" I thought about it long after they left. There was something else I'd asked Evan earlier too, about what it would cost me to have his help. Not that I wouldn't pay it. I would have paid anything. But I needed to know the ballpark just to get my bearings. That's when I also found out we'd taken on some new partners while I was down. It hit me that I hadn't been part of a single major business decision in weeks. I needed to catch up, maybe call a meeting at the house or back at the office to get a clearer picture of where we stood financially and operationally. But for now I was spent. "Thanks for everything, Evan," I said before heading home. The ride back was quiet. The kind of silence that lets your thoughts pile up until they feel like they're sitting on your chest. I rolled through the garage and into the house, still digesting everything. Simone was waiting inside. She looked at me and shook her head gently, catching the tail end of a call I was having with Sid. "Come, my vile prisoner," she said with a playful smile. Let's put JW to bed and start again tomorrow. Yes, mistress of the dungeon, I replied in my most pathetic tone. I hear and obey. I put on the saddest face I could muster, which made her laugh. That sound, her giggle, it was like a spark in a long dark night. She helped me to the bedroom, undressed me down to my new underwear, and guided me gently into bed. Then, like a mother tucking in a child, she patted my head and whispered, "You be a good boy, and maybe. And if you're good," Simone whispered with a sly smile, "I'll give you a treat tomorrow." I actually shivered a little at that, half from anticipation, half from disbelief that my life had taken such a surreal turn again. The mix of tenderness and tension was hard to describe. But that night I slept better than I had in weeks. The next day we returned to the courtroom and things quickly turned serious again. The opposing attorney laid out a scenario. With the information and evidence I had about Simone's affair with Carter, I could have easily filed a civil suit. One for alienation of affection against Carter himself. Another against Ellison and Barrett, her employer, for not enforcing the company's own internal policies. Chapter 17, subsection D1, fraternization between supervisor and subordinate, was all there. The case would have been strong. But I didn't pursue any of that. I never tried to ruin anyone's career or life. Instead, I did one thing, filed for divorce. Quietly. Without vengeance. They said I could have destroyed Simone's reputation and Carter's too. But I didn't. During cross-examination, one of the defense attorneys posed a hypothetical. Is it possible that new evidence was introduced during the 23 hours between the initial search and the second round of investigation? Objection. The prosecutor, Mr. Anderson, barked. That calls for speculation. Sustained, the judge said firmly. The jury will disregard the question. Mr. Briggs, please stay within your lane. I stand corrected, Your Honor, Briggs said with a respectful nod. Detective, the defense continued, were there any other suspects considered in this case? No, sir, the detective replied. With the evidence we found, we didn't see the need to expand the investigation. Evans stood then, straightening his notes. If needed, he said, we can show definitive proof that my client was physically incapable of carrying out the crime. Objection. Anderson shouted again. The judge slammed his gavel. Order, he roared. Mr. Anderson, the defense has every right to submit such a motion. I will decide whether it stands. He looked out across the room with intensity. I want both counsels in my chambers. Immediately, he ordered. Bang. Court is recessed, the bailiff announced. All rise. We stood. Arthur gathered up his notes and followed Evan out. I sat quietly, heart pounding. Later that afternoon, when the session resumed, the courtroom felt different. Heavy but expectant. The judge returned to the bench, straightened his papers, and took a moment before speaking. I want to thank you, Mr. Langston, for being a man of integrity. Your restraint, your conduct, and the testimony we've heard paint a different picture than the one the prosecution tried to frame. He turned toward the gallery. Let it be known, if anyone in this courtroom has information that could assist Mr. Anderson's office or law enforcement, speak now. Otherwise, this case is dismissed. He picked up the gavel and struck it down. With prejudice. Court is adjourned. Bang. The courtroom stirred. Relief swept through me in waves so strong it almost knocked the wind out of me. As I sat there trying to take it all in, the judge turned toward me one last time. Mr. Langston, he said, would you do me the honor of joining me in my chambers? I'd like a word with you in private, the judge said, his voice firm but calm. Of course, Your Honor, I replied, guiding my power chair behind him as we made our way into his chambers. Once the door was closed, he removed his robe, revealing a surprisingly casual pair of slacks and a button-down shirt underneath. I could feel the shift in atmosphere instantly. It wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was personal. To my surprise, Evan and Simone were already waiting for me inside. I looked at them, exhausted to my core, and asked, I'm tired, can we just go home for a while? They both nodded. But first, there was something I needed to hear. It turned out the police had followed up on the leads I'd given them, about Adam, Pat, and Ted. Max, the weakest link in the group, cracked almost immediately. He spilled everything. He told them how Adam had masterminded the plan as a way to get revenge, on me and Simone both. It was Adam who threw the first punch. But all three took part in what turned into a brutal beating. Nathaniel, he was just a pawn in their twisted little game. A tool to get under my skin. But it didn't go the way they planned. Theodore, a law clerk, someone I barely knew, had played a much darker role. He was the one who made sure I vanished. That's how I ended up in that filthy basement cell. Turns out, the place hadn't been used in over a decade. It was meant for prisoners who had dangerous communicable diseases, quarantine cells that were long forgotten by most. The plan was simple: put me somewhere no one would look. Somewhere I'd fade into the background. Disappear. And it almost worked. I probably would have died in that cell if it hadn't been for pure chance. An officer had gone down there not to check on prisoners, but to dig through some old case files stored in a room nearby. By nothing short of a miracle, he heard me, barely audible moans in my sleep. That sound saved my life.